Fashion. Worldwide, it is a $1.7 trillion industry and growing. But it also accounts for nearly 10% of humanity's global carbon footprint. And that's mainly from the use of land, water, chemicals, and non-renewable resources. Plastics have outgrown cotton as the world's most dominant fiber, now making up about 60% of material made into clothing, according to the UN, with laundry releasing around 500,000 tons of plastic microfibers into the ocean every year. To combat this, many are calling for a shift to sustainable and more environmentally friendly fashion. Well, sustainable fashion expert Mary Fellows is here with us. She's founder of Green With Studio, a firm that says it creates sustainability roadmaps for companies wanting to make the transition. She styled Oscar and BAFTA winners, is known for her work at Vogue, and she's here to talk about the group's latest work on how technology can power sustainability. Mary, it's a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for your time. Sustainability in fashion is becoming such a diverse topic. Let's first talk about what in the fashion industry, or what about it rather, is mostly harmful to the environment.
It's hard to know where to begin with that, Reagan, but I'll go from the garment's life cycle. So if you start with the extraction of raw materials, the fashion industry uses an awful lot of raw materials, be it whether it's growing the cotton, which has pesticide use, which damages the soil, whether it's fossil fuels that create the synthetic clothing, such as polyester or nylon, whether it's viscose, which comes from trees. So you've got the raw material extraction, which is very damaging. Then you've got the processing and the dyeing and the finishing and the amount of chemicals that are required to create those into materials, and then huge amounts of water, a lot of energy, quite often which isn't from renewable sources, to turn those materials into clothing. You've also got abuse in the supply chain of slave labor, because you cannot really possibly have clothing that costs the same amount as a cup of coffee when you consider the amount of inputs that have gone into it. And this is only just the upstream of fashion. When it comes to the downstream side, which is post-purchase, and once it's in the consumer's hands and where this clothing or product goes to dye, you're left with these huge waste streams of fashion, because people are wearing their clothes so much less and buying so much more.
So because in part of people like you, we understand the impact the fashion world has on the environment. Do you think big brands care about this? And if they do, are they doing anything about it?
It really varies from brand to brand. I mean, I think the brands that are doing a lot are Chloe. They've become B Corp recently, and they hired Gabriella Hearst, who's a fantastic designer who's had her own very strongly sustainable luxury label before joining Chloe. The other luxury group that are doing very well indeed is Kering, which is spelled Kering. They used to be the Gucci Group and PPR. They have a huge innovation division. So of anyone who's doing well in the luxury sector, you know, of the better known household name brands, those would be my first choices.
So you recently spoke at the COP27 Climate Summit, where you talked about how technology is playing a role in reducing a company's carbon footprint, particularly in the fashion industry. Just give us an example or two of this new technology.
Well, the really interesting thing is that it's down to software and hardware. Okay, so in terms of the hardware, you're seeing innovation and technology in places where around material science. So if you take a company like Pangaea, who are B2B and B2C facing, or other companies like Bolt Threads or Carbios or Evernew, there's millions of people out there who are working towards using technology for innovation in the material science. That's one way. And then when it comes to software, you're looking at the use of QR codes to see traceability in fashion. So ideally you should have as much visibility on what you put on your body as what you put in your body. So when you buy food, you're quite rightly able to see the ingredients and the calories. So why would you not be able to have that with your fashion? Right now you can only see that it's, let's say, 80% cotton or whatever it is. So with QR codes, and then they will lead into these NFC chips, which are the same things that allow you to pay using your phone, and eventually these other radio frequency chips called RFIDs, which will allow you to be able to scan actually down to a forensic fiber level. So as we move through this movement, we're going to see that the consumer and everybody else involved, the stakeholders in the supply chains, everybody else will be able to look at a garment and, using technology, see exactly who made it, how it was made by what, and to see the credentials and the traceability and the transparency of that product.
That's fantastic. Do you see consumer trends changing? I mean, is the climate and the environment things that people care about when they go shopping, particularly with the Christmas season coming up?
I think it's a very difficult one, because I think there's still a quite wide perception that you have to forfeit something if you want to be a sustainable shopper. So you either have to forfeit in terms of cost, in that you've got to spend more, or people think quite often that they have to forfeit style and indulgence in order to buy something sustainable. The reality is you don't. But I think there's still a lot of an education piece to be done around how you convince shoppers and consumers that it's not a choice between sustainability or something fantastic and wonderful.
Quick last question to you, Mary. What advice would you recommend for someone wanting to make that change fashion-wise? I know when we speak like veganism versus meat eaters, people just think you just switch like this. But obviously, I'm guessing it's not the same in the fashion industry. What advice would you give?
I think the old adage in fashion goes that the most sustainable fashion items are the ones that are already in your wardrobe. It's a well-known phrase we hear a lot. And that's because the more that you can increase utilization of your clothing rather than disposing of it and buying new things, that's the best that the consumers can do. Now, of course, people do, their clothes wear out, they want something new. The great new thing about fashion as well when it comes to software on this point-back technology is that in the future, we're going to see fashion become a sharing-based economy where wardrobes will become an asset class, just like Airbnb turned your home as an asset into a sharing economy. Okay, so nowadays you're seeing the ability to be able to rent fashion, to resell it, and there's platforms all over the world now like Depop and The Real Real and Vestiaire Collective and Vinted and many others where you can resell or buy secondhand. And nowadays secondhand has had a complete makeover where I've been buying thrift shop clothing for 25 years, but a lot of people would often feel a bit like, oh, somebody else's clothes, but now it's become normal. So those are some of the ways, there's many others, but those are some of the ways you can be a more...
Yeah, we just had that argument at the office about second-hand clothing, but we have to leave it there for now. Mary Fellows at Greenwith Studio, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure.